Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let me thank let me thank four of you out of about a dozen, I think, donations that have come in since Mr. Producer headed out to Italy. He's just back, I think, today, and so I'm actually doing a video for the first time in a month. Maybe I'll forget myself. Maybe that'll be a good thing too. Laura King, Laura K, Capit A, David D, and Jimmy C. You know who you guys are. Three of these are recurring donations, if not all of them, actually. And I also have here, I think I mentioned already, Theodora, I've got your query about doing florals, and I think I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration for you, but I don't know exactly when. I actually set up and tried to do one while Mr. Producer was gone, and I failed dismally at getting the camera stuff set up well. So that'll be a that'll be another try. Okay. Today's I don't know really what B Maynard is sending this question, and I really can't quite follow it. So as you can see, I took it maybe you could say even a little defensively to say when he started to talk about high contrast spots, and I don't mean defensively in the sense that I expect him to be challenging in one sense, but there's always a question with ours, or shall we call it the Boston School way of thinking. And I say, shall we call it that? You know, remember everything I'm trying to do is to carry on discussions about that methodology that makes it the Boston School. You know, which is, as I've said, if you look at the starts that we've shown in the past, the lay-ins, I think I give you a pretty clear example of how that's different from what most people do. And the lay-in, of course, is the first part of the method. So, but very much of it goes around organizing spots. You know, the right color, the right value, in the right place. Conversation is always there. So, let's read what B. Maynard has to say. How do you organize the high contrast spots? So, how do you organize the high contrast spots with the psychological weight of the subject? And I I take that to be a question about whether or not a let's just for now say a sketch treatment can actually deliver psychological weight. You know, psychological weight's a funny term. I do like what Sargent said when somebody said, you've captured that personality," and he says something to the effect, "I was just trying to get the right color, the right value, in the right place." He didn't say that, but but it's the equivalent of what he said, you know, and just trying to downplay that idea that he's painting psychology. On the other hand, when we paint, and this is maybe the bottom line of this entire conversation, when we paint, especially portraits, I mean, there's an element of what we're doing that has that in it that we hope to convey. That I say what we see in the sitter is there's an element of expression, of personality, if you want to call it that, of seriousness and various things. And I'll show you some images. And of course, you're watching as you put down these colors and values and effects in their right places. You're watching for that to show up. Otherwise, it's not going to be a satisfying likeness to you. So, but psychological weight and things like that, I don't know for sure what that means. So, this could be way off track, but it's still an interesting discussion. I mean, way off track from what you meant. B. How do you organize the high contrast spots with the psychological weight of the subject, i.e., the weight of faces, and especially pointing hands? I understand that we are thinking in abstract terms, but can we completely lose the subject content without losing the expression and motivation of the image? Now, that's a really good question. How do you deal with this? And I've already answered it, but we'll look at pictures and see if we can bring anything else to the table. When you say, I understand you're thinking in abstract terms, yeah, the color relations, value relations, location on the page in relation to other things on the page. That's all what you may as well call abstract and relational per the kind of data we can put down. You know, all we can put down is paint. Some paint lighter, some darker, some more chromatic, some red, yellow, blue, et cetera, and we can make it different sizes, and we can make shapes and other things where they meet up. That's what we do in abstract terms, right? But there's not a painter of any time or in any method that lose sight of expressing the likeness of the portrait. And the likeness isn't going to be satisfying to any of us, even guys who just do that, unless it conveys what the sitter has for content. So just remember that the content in a sitter is a function of his color values and locations of those things, gradations of color, all kinds of stuff, sizes of blobs, in relation to each other, the angle, all these things, and they come together. If you're paying attention, they come together. They can only be organized, right? In relation to each other. But their organization is producing already, before you even look at the painting or start painting, the organization of the visual data, dark is dark and light is light, and anything else, all those things, they're already producing this sensation of what you call expression. I don't know if you use that term, actually. I did, though. Oh, yeah, expression, or other things, the psychology of the person. It's already there. And so the likeness, making a good likeness of these things, if you're watching, and that's a big deal. A lot of times when you're working, you just are doing rote. And if you're not persistently paying attention to the big impression, that is to say, the color, light, and all that sort of thing, or any other content, including, if you want to say, personality and things like that, we don't know how to do personality, but we do know how to do likenesses. And if a person sitting there has one, or so maybe we could say when a sitter is sitting there and we notice that they're conveying something that's very pleasing by way of personality, we note things in relation to that, right? But it's just things of the paint, certain elements of the angle of the part of the lid of the eye, or something like that, is off. And if it's off, it doesn't convey the same thing as if it's on. So, but I think this is a fun question. I think a lot of times students get lost, forgetting that it is a paint problem. The likeness in front of you is a paint problem. It's the question whether or not you actually will stay in the game long enough is more the question, right? To get whatever else you want. Leighton has produced one of my favorite portraits of all times. It's a portrait of the explorer, Sir Richard Burton, a British explorer. I don't remember what his exploring took in. But it's one that's always pleased me. It gives the sense of a weathered face. Somebody's been in some serious desert storms or at sea or something and seen trials, and it's got a remarkable. Now, whatever expression is there, if you set the sitter down and he doesn't have it, it won't do you any good to try to bring something to it. You don't have that capacity. You just flat don't. You can try to bring psychology and stuff into it, and so some modernists do it by deforming faces, and I don't get anything out of that. But here's a nice example. You pose a guy so that it shows some of those scars or the ruggedness of the character. Undoubtedly a bold character who's just constantly pushing himself to do things that require courage and the ability to survive. Whatever that word would be. So there's that one, and so. As I said, you pose the model, so he already does that. As Gamel used to say, my teacher used to say, you can only make what's sitting in front of you. Now, we're talking about portraits being a likeness of the character sitting there. But you can pose people. You can change the light until you have the character, and that's where more of the work is going. When you have the character, that thing about that person, all of a sudden you'll see something about that really sort of seems, in your mind at least, as little as you may know the sitter, that seems to rather either sum up his character or say something nice about him per his features, by way of his features. I mean, some people just look a little like devils, and you have to try to move it, unless you want to make him look like a devil. If his personality is sweet and he looks like a devil. I had a sweet friend who was like that. And you want to turn him and put him in such and such a light so it doesn't look like a devil. So, et cetera, et cetera. So, but you can figure that out. Yeah, it just makes sense. But if this is an example of whether the method is the defining thing about making an expression, let's say, what did you call it, a psychological something or other. In both these pictures, there's that content. The one on the left looks significantly more, or shall we say, less labored, but it's already got this sort of look of a, shall we say, a worried man. Well, the one on the right has got the sort of a similar look, but he's got a more of a strong personality. He's got a will to live and survive and whatever else. I'm saying you can look at it like that if you want to. Rembrandt, presumably, looking at himself, what would you say? You can say he posed himself again in such a way so as to be able to express that thing that was in his mind or in his face. And he does it so well. But the marks on the left one are considered to be more superficial, and yet they still do that sort of conveying. I say superficial, meaning they seem to be largely, as you were saying, effects, sort of light effects and things like that. High contrast spots. Not that I know what that means, B. Maynard. Holbein and Duveneck here are in two wildly different worlds. And, as much as Holbein has smoothed up the skin and all that sort of stuff, I don't find there's any more character in that than in the one by Duveneck, where he's made it by the blob, by the effects, shall we say. What did Sargent call him? The greatest American master of the brush. But they put down a spot and leave it sort of mindset. So the old professor, that's in Boston, the MFA, if anybody's ever looking to see that one. And then here's Ang and Tarbell. One's a judge, one left. I don't recall what Bertin, I don't recall what his role was, whether he was a politician or what he was, the gentleman on the right. But in both the hands and the head, I don't see any loss by the method. Do you see loss by the method of character, of psychology, psychological weight? It's as I said, it's in the pose already. Whether you are, that's one of the reasons you want to be able to be accurate in the relationships of things within the, of the visual data of the content that way. And but if you set up something that really expresses that, whatever you call the psychological weight, and then don't draw the relationships well, you're not going to get anything, psychological weight or anything. So now here too, that one by Sargent and one by Benson, in which you can see how superficially handled, almost in the sense of being sketches, the heads are. And I particularly like the one in the background. Let's see if I can get my arrow working. Where you can almost not make it out, and yet there's some serious sense of character there. It's fascinating how much can be done in just a few marks. And again, here are your high contrast spots. It's all visual order stuff. Well, the visual order is just the content that's actually there when you're sitting somebody down. It's just what it is. You can't do a thing about it. Our method is just simply is doing it a particular way. But if you don't get to that, you won't get the same qualities that sit before you. You might get something else by some chance, but it won't be under your control. That's my view of it. A lot of times painters think that they control this. You control the relationships of the values of the colors and all that sort of stuff in their place on the page. You control that stuff in the sense of a given object. But on the other hand, if you want to paint something out of your head, feel free to do that. I don't think you're going to find, if you have a sitter who's got these qualities, and I assume we were talking about portrait, but if you have a sitter who's got these qualities, they're already sitting in front of you, why would you do that? And I do see that even imaginative painters are looking for a human. It looks like they borrowed somebody who had a certain kind of character that they then were able to use. But in both cases here, you get a really striking sense of the personality of the Sargent in particular. It's really something. And of course, it's all it is, as he said, it's just getting those marks in the right places, the right color value, etc. So it's already there. Now, I may not be answering your question, so feel free to come back at me, okay? This one on the left is both these are Tarbells, are decamps. And they're this is a demonstration of a painting that can start more or less loose. It can be pushed further. and depending on what you need, like in the Burton portrait, you're going to have to probably work on it to get those scars and the lines in his face, the ruggedness, to actually show. So you may have to, it'll go beyond the first wave of marks that set up the head as a skull or as a colored blob with form. It's certainly going to have to go beyond that. So it's not like there's a superficial treatment it's going to get. Now, a lot is in the gesture, though. A huge amount is in the gesture of the head and the color of the head and the form of the head before it becomes those little things, so that, for example, the pose of the Burton, you can see he's first of all, he stood low, he stood below him a little bit. You can see the underplanes, see how the eyes are in perspective. You're looking up at the guy. So he's already created a very noble or dominating kind of sense of the man. And what's I going to say about that? But as I said, it's already in the pose. So in that gesture, just in the gesture and the blobs, you would have already had that. It would have showed already that aspect of him, that psychological weight, isn't it? Depending on what you mean, of course. So I'm just having some fun because I didn't fully know what you meant, and I'm just stabbing at it, okay? But for the purposes of talking about how visual content, pure and simple, is the conveyor. The color values are the conveyor of the likeness, and the likeness can be, will inevitably have some element of the personality in it, depending on whether or not your awareness is there. If you're making a likeness and it just doesn't convey the character that you plainly see. Now, a lot of times people are trying to convey character that they don't plainly see, and that's a mistake to try to think you can make that up, especially in a portrait. But in the case of the model on the left, the sitter with the birdcage, here you can see a very expressive hand made out of blobs and abstractions. It really gives you a strong sense of how the game works. You can look closer and see that there's a lot of data in there, but it's not connected in the sense of realism, trying to prove or make any points or anything like that. But I think I'm going off from where you're trying to be. So there may be a couple other ones here. The Velazquez, the one on the right, you can see that head and even the hand, the gesture of that hand. That's where you're talking about pointing hands. Well, that hand is a very effective, delicate brush holding hand. And as I say, it's holding a brush with just a classic sort of light touch. It's in the hole. It's there. And yet, if you look closely at this thing, there isn't much to see in a close look. It doesn't require noodling up or any of those other things. It's already that's what is so important about what the Boston School guys do is they try to get right to the point as quickly as they can. And that is one of those things, the gesture of the hand, but it's just the visual content that makes it so. And you put down the strong visual content and don't add anything more to it, and you should already have the gesture, the size, the light, and all those things, the form. It should already be doing the hand thing. It should even set out from the face and so on, if other value relationships are correctly played. I just showed the left Velazquez as one of my all-time favorite because it's so simple and thin in paint. It's just one of those things that defies, a lot of the tendency of the modern world to define paint by how thick it is. Like you weigh a painting, just decide how much to spend on it. But anyway, a very, very beautiful, very, very, what's the right word, economical portrait. And beautifully expressive in both cases, obviously. Now this one, here's the gesture of the hand and all that sort of stuff. So you can take from this what you can, B. Maynard. So what you have here is very powerful gestures of hands, expressive hands, but you can see they're made out of blobs of light, very powerful, just contrasts, as you say in your point. Let's review your point just for a second again. Just we'll get back to that shot. How do you organize the high contrast spots with the psychological weight of the subject? So in this case, the subject it's hands in this case, the pointing hands, the gesturing hands. So So that's where, I can only say don't doubt the methodology of the Boston School, what it can convey. In this case, Sargent. But but organizing the high contrast spots is what you do. And they either, if they're well done, if there's psychological weight, shall we say, in the image you're working from, then if you're good at what you do, you'll convey it. That's what you're working with as part of the content of the color relations, value relations, and all that stuff taken together. All of which I think is really what we call the drawing, but in that sense of expressing all the data that's latent in the likeness. So it just behooves you to know, and I would say that's just everybody at large, it just behooves you to have skills in all the things that the likeness in front of you does. The color relations, the size relations, the color movements, just all kinds of, every kind of thing, including light effects and sharp edges and high contrast, low lostness, all those things. You can't count all the content. You can't count in some sense. I mean, in one sense, it's simple what we have to use. Just color spots, right color, the right value, the right place. But to get to the likeness you're talking about requires skills that you wouldn't have analyzed. You're just good at one thing, and that is making this to this and that to that. But you're really good at it. And you don't take for granted that you're smart. You just take for granted you're only an idiot who can, or a child, who can accept the data as what it is and just treat it abstractly correctly. And if the content of the sitter, me, say in this case, if the content's there, you're going to have it. Whatever psychological weight and all those other things you're talking about. Watch out that you don't go into those places, though, and try to think you can do things that painting doesn't particularly do well. I remember seeing a pile of I think a big room full of heads, and they were intended to say, this is the expression of that, this kind of pain, that kind of happiness. And some sculptor I forget who it is, I think maybe German, but he took a lot of pains like a scientist to try to sculpt the expression of this and that. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I don't know if I could have ever said, I couldn't have named what precisely he was trying to say. The human expression is ambiguous. So there's a lot of other data that may go with it. And so whatever you're doing, the bottom line is this, and why the value of Impressionism. The bottom line is this: if the person is sitting there without the expression, the psychological gravitas or whatever you want, they don't have it in the lighting, in the way they're sitting and what they're wearing, there's not a thing you're going to be able to do, really, except fake it. And faking it, God help us all when we start doing that. Okay. So there are kinds of mastery. Well, there's all kinds of them. I mean, some people bring more to a facial expression. Rembrandt, I don't know if anybody's ever been like Rembrandt in that way. But what it is he is who knows what it is in some ways, because an imaginative painter can do more. You can draw a little head and make it look like it's happy, randomly, or make it look like it's mad and all those things randomly. So I wouldn't take anything away from anybody trying to do that. I'd hate to do it to a sitter, though. So if you're talking about doing something like a portrait, that's an impressionist problem. The sitter has to do it first, or you're not going to get what you want. And you're not going to get it by faking it and messing around with his face and stuff like that, or her. I would recommend against it, but maybe somebody can show me one where somebody actually did that and it does something successfully. But yeah, I wouldn't want the loss, actually, of the truth of that moment. I wouldn't want to suffer the loss by bringing some invention into the thing. I just wouldn't. But that may start a whole new question. So I think I'll leave it at that, Mr. B. Maynard, or actually, I don't know if you're a guy or a woman. So I guess, but still, I'll leave it at that. And And again, I want to thank you guys so heartily for taking care of us while Mr. Producer was gone. In this case, today, Laura K. Caput, Art, that's Theodora, David D., and Jimmy C. Thank you guys ever so much. I hope you're all doing well and that you're getting benefits from our efforts here. All right. So take care. See you in the next one. Hope you have a good painting week.